All right, so I've got a little talking head video for you. We're going to talk about the big Solarwinds hack and what that means for your organization, as well as just kind of cybersecurity in general. I'd planned to hold off on this, to be quite honest with you, until January when we're putting together a security webinar. You'll be getting some more details about here right after the holidays. But decided that with the new information that we got last night, as well as this continuing to just be a major story, as it should be, as we'll discuss, that it was best to just go ahead and get out some information now that you guys could just listen to. So again, I've got some prepared notes. If you see me glancing down, that's what I'm looking at. But other than that, this is just kind of giving you all an idea of what this means, as well as some things to think about. There's no actions or anything you need to take right now. We're going to talk more about what this hack means. What we know today, which will change, but what we know today, and again, just some basic points to start considering, because this sort of thing, this is big. The SolarWinds hack, there's no other way to put it. This is big. This is probably the biggest breach we know of and have ever seen. It's huge. So what happened is that we believe that hackers working for the Russian government, and let me kind of set that aside. From when we talk about in security a lot, we'll talk about Russia, and what we usually mean there is Russian just criminal enterprises. So they're not necessarily government affiliated, but just Russian criminal enterprises that make their money through selling your data, basically, and breaching you and getting ransoms and things like that. In this case, we believe that this group was directly connected to the Russian government. So one of their cyber attack groups, one of their espionage groups, broke into a company called SolarWinds, and SolarWinds is a pretty massive company. They make a lot of software for IT management and support. In fact, they have an arm that does software exclusively for industry that we're in, and IT service providers. But in this case, this was their main group that sells to Fortune 500 companies, as well as a lot of government agencies. And so this is big. And what happened is these hackers breached their internal network, and that allowed them to actually insert code into SolarWinds' Orion platform, which powers a lot of the software they use for network monitoring and management. Okay, so again, SolarWinds makes this software. They sell it to these agencies, to these Fortune 500 companies, and then in turn, these companies or these agencies use it to better monitor their network, ironically, in some cases, try to keep things safe. But because hackers were able to actually get into SolarWinds' internal network and insert this code, it looked legit, right? And it was a small piece of code. These are very sophisticated hackers that did this, and they left virtually no trace. We found out about this over the weekend, so a little bit over 5 days ago. Probably this has been known for maybe a couple days before that, is what it sounds like. Maybe just a bit more, but not by much. Maybe most at the 10 days mark is when this was discovered. So this is big, which means also that we're probably not going to know about the full effects for years. This is just the way this stuff works. There's tons of logs folks are going to have to pour through. There's tons of, again, what would be in most cases normal activity, but it turns out, no, it's not. It was perpetrated by these folks, but they were very sophisticated. They made it in some cases look like traffic was coming from the very city of the agency or the company, or in some cases, like actual city of Austin, Texas. I think they announced last night was breached, and so actual coming from Austin, Texas. These guys were good. There's not going to be the typical telltale marks where we can see, oh yeah, this came from Russia or this came from United Arab Emirates or something like that. This is big, and Microsoft is one of the folks that was breached. It was just announced last night. Now, at this point, Microsoft says that they've been monitoring closely. They've been doing a lot of work on this since this broke, and they don't see any evidence, period, that they got close to customer data or anything like that. So those of you that use Office 365, which I know is most of you, we do too, use Windows, that sort of thing, you shouldn't have to worry about anything there. But I'm sure Microsoft is going through this with a fine-tooth comb. One thing to note about Microsoft is, if you know about the old Microsoft, Windows XP, before that, Windows 98, that sort of thing, just horribly insecure software. They have one of the best security teams, period, in the world at this point. So I have full confidence that they're going to be able to uncover a lot of this, and so hopefully their initial analysis is right. Again, we're monitoring this, but at this point we don't see any impacts there. But again, it's going to be probably years before we know the full extent of this damage. And there's going to be events that are going to happen 6, 12, 18 months from now in the cybersecurity landscape that there's probably always going to be some doubt and wonder of, is this somehow related to this initial breach? Because the initial recommendations from the big government agencies like the CISA that manage cybersecurity, government was to literally like throw all the equipment that was breached in the trash and to start over. Now, obviously, that's not something you can just, even government agencies can go out and do tomorrow. They don't have that sort of equipment in reserve. But it's that significant a breach because the concern is while they got in through this Orion software from SolarWinds that we know about, the Orion platform, what else did they do to maintain their access, knowing that at some point this would be found out? And so that's the big thing. That's the race that all these agencies are in right now. And again, it's big. They breached the agency that handles our nuclear weapons stockpiles. So it's that severe. This is definitely going to be not only an embarrassing breach, but one of the largest, I would say, bar none, that we've seen. And we haven't seen the fallout full yet. Expect to see more stuff reported, especially over the holidays and things. It's going to be bad. So now let's get to your likely questions that you're going to have, because I mean, I gave you some background. This is interesting, but why weren't they detected is probably a question you've got. I mean, if they gained access, why are we just now finding out about it? Because everything we know says they gained access probably around March of this year to SolarWinds network and inserted sometime between March and May their code. So they've been in there, good 6 months or so into these networks. Well, you'll be surprised to know that the average hacker, and that's not even like a sophisticated nation state hacker like Russia here, is able to breach a network and stay in there for 9 to 12 months before they're detected. I'm not kidding. 9 to 12 months. That's the big thing. So you wonder why these folks aren't found out, and it's because, they don't want to be. It's a game of cat and mouse. They're really good, but think about this in standard terms, non-technology terms. What would happen if you found out somebody had broken into your house and was literally like extracting stuff for 6 months? I mean, how would that make you feel? What would you do? I mean, I think about it as the old like termite or mold infestation in a house. I think that's probably an apt thing here. So once it gets in, at some point you're starting to tear down walls and really see inside. At some point you just discover so much, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to have to burn down the house and start over. Demolish, burn all that stuff and just rebuild. And that's what a lot of these companies and agencies may be looking at doing, either in just specific areas or in some cases full blown. Now, again, that's a years-long process. And in the meantime, you've got to worry about new equipment you're bringing online. How are you going to secure that to make sure they're not able to just piggyback on access they already have? It's a big deal for these sorts of things, these organizations that have already been breached. And it's a big deal for anybody who uses this software, because now they've got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in most cases to get cybersecurity experts in there to figure out what's going on. Because if they were able to breach this platform and this company was using that platform, there's every indication that they got in, even if they didn't end up doing much once they got in. But I'm sure the hackers poked around to anything they could just to try to figure it out. What they probably had is some sort of like ranked target list in terms of, all right, who should we target based on this known list that we've got of organizations we could go after, and who's the highest risk, like who's the chance that they're going to find us and we're going to get exposed. So how are they expelling the hackers, right? How are they getting rid of them? Again, that's really undetermined at this point. Microsoft has taken some steps along with some other security vendors, including one, FireEye, which is a big one that was also breached through this, but they've apparently been able to clean up a lot and also isolate a lot on their network to get new equipment in and be able to start back to work. So they're assisting in not only figuring out what was breached, but in terms of trying to remediate and break down this access and ensure that these folks are thoroughly expelled. But it's a big deal. I mean, the guidance right now, and be clear, this is not a ransomware attack. This is just they stole a lot of data and were inside networks, and we don't know fully what they stole. But nothing was encrypted. We don't know the level of sabotage otherwise, but this is not a ransomware. But for ransomware attacks, the recommendation now from most security providers is that the only thing you can safely do is to get a brand new hard drive, put it in there, reinstall everything, and don't restore from any backup that you can't be sure that the hackers weren't in before. So again, this is a big thing, big time stuff. So final question you may have is, should I just get off the grid and move to Montana? And I mean, that's a possibility. But ultimately, technology is just so embedded in our lives that we've just got to find ways to, better protect ourselves and deal with this, and hope that the tools and things that are available to us as good citizens of cyber technology are ahead of the hackers for the most part. So let's talk about how this affects your organization in particular. And I realize I'm speaking to a broad swath of you, so I can't get too specific, but we're going to talk about just some basics here. So first of all, we at Parkway Tech use no Solarwinds software. So there's no concerns that any of you were breached at all through this. We've checked. There's no SolarWinds software installed on your systems, so by any other parties or anything like that. So we're good there. There's no risk from this breach to you guys directly. Now, that being said, this is always a fear of any of us, honestly, because any sort of software that has visibility into your network, and you need this software to protect you, to make things automated, to enable you to get the things done that you need to do. It's always a risk that these sorts of things happen, especially at this level. It's a big concern. And there's no evidence that any of our vendors, by the way, were breached through this or used SolarWinds software themselves. So that's another thing I can let you know, except for, of course, Microsoft. But again, Microsoft currently says zero evidence that they got anywhere close to customer data, end user facing stuff, devices, networks, in their data centers, stuff like that. So obviously we kind of wait with anticipation to hope that bears out. But I trust Microsoft a bit more than a lot of other organizations, maybe smaller ones or something, that I would in this situation, just because of their security. And while yes, there's a big reputational risk to say, hey, we were breached and this sort of stuff happened. But I also know that Microsoft, wants the trust of its users, and so would do what they needed to do to, remediate that and let us know if there was an issue. So again, stay tuned. This could change. These sorts of developments, things always change in the interim when it's an early story. But this is an excellent time to reconsider whether you're making the right investments in cybersecurity. To kind of preview what we're going to talk about in January, cybersecurity is just more important than ever. I know I've kind of hammered this point home in previous things, but especially with the work from home looking to last for another several months, that opens up new vulnerabilities. Cybersecurity is going to get to be an increasingly large part of your technology budget, and it's going to grow it a bit. It's the facts. I know most of us are stretched with budgets already. This is not the time you want to be hearing this, and I apologize, but that is what it is. We're going to have to look at new tools, new detection methods, new additional stuff, and a lot of this stuff, even if there's not new software required, is just very human labor intensive, because some of this stuff just can't be automated. There's certain things that at this point human eyes can just spot a heck of a lot better and set up a heck of a lot better than any sort of automated tool can. I expect also that this will really accelerate the push for national cybersecurity legislation and regulations. Currently, the U.S. is one of the few developed countries that does not have a national framework for that. So California and New York are two states I know of that have their own, but those are already being litigated in courts because, well, do they apply to me in North Carolina? Well, if you're doing business with somebody in New York, which you ideally very could be, then yes, they do. And so, well, how's that fair? And what if it contradicts this other thing or my state's guidance? So I'm sure there's going to be national rules and regulations. And I'm sure those national rules and regulations, just like when HIPAA was introduced for medical practices and then related entities that deal with PII, I am sure that that's going to cause a pretty nice spike in some spending that you're going to have to do, both in assessments, both in audits, and also then in terms of better protection for your networks. There's going to be new baselines that maybe some of you were ahead on, but for the most part, we're going to have to look at doing. And of course, we're keeping an eye on any of that. If any sort of legislation starts to come up, I'll be sure to talk about some of the ramifications as that gets closer to development. And finally, I anticipate that cyber insurance costs and requirements are going to go up from this, probably pretty astronomically at your next renewal time, as well as increasingly smaller payouts. And those have all been trends with cyber insurance for the last few years as these breaches multiply and get more costly, and the requirements to notify and everything go up and get stricter. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines from state and federal agencies now for just a breach for a small business. It's big. And again, I'm not going to get into all the details there, saving a lot of that for a time in January where we're going to discuss some of these things. But if cybersecurity is not on your agenda and your radar, it needs to be. This is the sort of stuff that keeps us up at night, and a lot of that is so you don't have to be kept up at night. But cybersecurity is an increasingly quick landscape that just evolves so quickly that it's tough to keep up with. It's a lot to digest. A good portion of my week is spent nothing more than meeting with new vendors and digesting new information on cybersecurity as these threats evolve and change. And the guidance of, even 2 years ago of this is what you need to do is just like completely different. That's what we're talking about. And again, we'll get into more specifics in January. I'm sorry, I'm just not prepared. I was actually in the middle of putting together our webinar and also putting together preparations for us to already do some massive reevaluation of our own cybersecurity stance here internally at Parkway Tech when this news broke. So I am, and also preparing for the holidays, of course. So like the rest of you, I've got a lot on my plate too. But it is time again for that reevaluation. So we'll talk about that. 2021 is a great year to start taking additional steps, because you're thinking it's not going to happen to you because you're small or because you've got antivirus or a firewall. That's just not the case anymore. It's a dangerous world with folks trying to probe you every day. And that's just the way it is. I saw some statistic the other day that said that the average firewall for a small business gets 40 probes an hour to try to find some sort of way into that network. And they do it. Question, well, why do they do this? Why in the world? Well, they do it because small businesses are easy targets because they don't have the budgets of big federal agencies or Fortune 500 companies. They don't have the IT staff and the skill there. This is big stuff to keep up with. Ransomware cost is over $150,000 per incident to a company, more than it was 3 years ago. So again, these costs have just gone up astronomically, which again is one reason why folks and companies are investing in more cybersecurity solutions, because yes, those costs add to the bottom line, but as the cost of breaches and the loss of reputation and all sorts of things go up, these things look more attractive than they did a few years ago. Being small is no protection. These attacks are increasingly easy to deploy. Obviously, chances of you guys getting targeted by the Russian government or Chinese government or North Korean government, Iranian government, some of the big nation state hackers that we know about, are pretty slim to none, which is some good news for you. But there's a ton of criminal enterprises that make billions of dollars every year carrying out these attacks, and they've gotten better, more sophisticated, and their tools are spread far and wide. So even, again, somebody just in their, mom's house in Kansas can easily launch an attack that on several small businesses and come away a millionaire from it. So that's the reality. That's what we're working to protect against. So more from me in January on this. Just a preview, I'm just going to tell you flat out that the basic protections that we build into all your plans are no longer enough. And so we're going to be talking more about some specifics and some recommendations. And a lot of this stuff's going to be personal and going to require some of your time to sit down and meet with us and to really uncover where the vulnerabilities, both technologically and physically, are in your systems, because we don't want to ignore things where, hey, we've got everything locked down with this great firewall, this great new security software. We've got 2FA enabled on all these systems, and we're really golden. Oh, but nobody ever put a lock on the server room door. Yeah, and so anybody can just go in and plug into your server with a USB key, and instantly they're on your network extracting data, right? So that's what we don't want. So we're going to be talking more about that. Again, look for an announcement of that webinar here after the holidays. It'll be in January. I'm not sure the exact dates. I got to look at my calendar, as well as making sure everybody's kind of back from the holidays. But it's going to be a big topic. Cybersecurity is definitely going to be something that we're talking about a ton this year. The sort of Solarwinds hack thing just really reinforces that. But hope you guys have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Appreciate your business here. Feel free to share the video with anybody you know, even if they're not a Parkway Tech client. Definitely some valuable information here. And again, we'll be talking more in January about some additional steps you guys are going to need to protect against, not necessarily the same attack here, but some similar things that we're seeing more and more frequently with more and more devastation. So, guys, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Wish I had a better note to end on, but I don't. But stay safe, socially distant here during the holidays. We don't want anybody coming down with a physical virus, with COVID, that's just horrible and wreaking havoc. And I will talk to you guys again in the new year.